Hello and welcome to Morning Bites with Stu Violet and me, Jason. We've got some great guests today with Brian and Brooke. As you know, this is a show where we've got 30 minutes to talk about the most important cybersecurity and privacy topics that are happening now. And we bring in some awesome guests like Brian and Brooke to get their take on what's important to them. Few reminders and house rules before we begin. Number one, these are our views and opinions that we're expressing here today, solely our own. We do have the comments that are live. So introduce yourself in the comments. Let us know what's on your mind, where you're from. And if you do have questions throughout, drop them in. We'll be paying attention to those. And Violet is very good about pulling out the funniest ones and showing them to the entire audience. So please do not miss that opportunity. Before we begin, we do have one important question that Violet brought up before, and we need everyone's intake on this. What is your intro song? So
Your
Violet,
hype up song. It's like
hype up song.
You
I
can't
messed
just
it
be
up.
intro.
I messed it up. You gotta see. I didn't have my hype up song today. So Violet, what's your hype up song?
I was just asked this at career day in front of a bunch of first graders and kindergartners, and I couldn't think of anything. The first thing that came to my mind was anything Rage Against the Machine, just because of computers. That's all they cared about. But no one, of course, knows what that is.
Not
No
at that
kindergartners.
age, probably.
Yeah,
not.
it was like in kindergarten. No, the rest
Unless
of
you're
us.
Brooks' kids, and then you know all the music.
Yeah, but they
I
don't
listened
like
to DNA
it.
by Kendrick Lamar in the gym this morning. That got me pumped up.
There you
So
go. I love it, Brian. What's yours?
My long-standing hype song has been "Sabotage" by the Beastie Boys.
classic.
That's a
Solid.
good one.
Solid.
That's a good one.
Brooke, what about you?
I hate this question because this is a question I always pose to other people, and I'm not used to being on the receiving end of it. I mean, I guess it depends on the circumstance, but I guess if I need to do something physical, then it'll be X gonna give it to you, DMX.
Oh.
But if it's anything that's like not physical, I just need to like get pumped up. I mean, it depends on the day. It really does. But I might steal BC Boys, but go with something from Paul's Boutique. I don't know which. It could really be any of them. Maybe Shake Your Rump. I'm really selling myself here, guys. I'm totally normal, I swear.
Really good intro, Jason. Best
I
one
love
yet.
it.
Burke knows a lot about cyber. That I can promise.
All right. Well, we don't have any of those tracks on tape right now, so unfortunately, we can't hype you up, Brooke. But we are rooting for you on this one. Lead us off. What is an article or news story that is top of mind for you?
So perhaps I've been tracking this because of my, as my husband would call it, outrageous spending habits. But I've been closely watching the 3 UK retail cyber breaches, especially because of the fact that they were in such close succession and not a lot of information has been given by the latest victim, Harrods, which holds a very soft spot in my heart, to my own financial detriment. But oh my God, see, I'm a disaster. I am anyway.
We only bring on disasters on
The
this.
physical impact of these attacks.
It caused everything to fail in my life. So what I found actually really interesting is with respect to the M&S, which is Marks and Spencer, for those of you who are not Anglophiles. It was originally said that, Scattered Spider was responsible for the ransom event. And, Harrods and Co-op, which was the third retailer, haven't exactly come out and said that this was a ransom event. But another article that caught my head was that DragonForce, who's been around for some time, they basically rebranded in March to be like some sort of, software as a service, ransomware as a service, I guess, kind of like almost like a global like hoteling situation where they could use the back office of what they do and have these people deploy it by their own brand. And so now something came out this morning on BBC that Scattered Spider actually was utilizing DragonForce's back office to exploit Harrods and attack them. So I just thought it was interesting that two of the stories that I was following this week kind of came together.
The DragonForce is interesting right now because they just took over Ransom Hub, which was one of the largest or by volume. So yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. I think it's interesting with Scattered Spider too because it really shows the ransomware ecosystem. Because before, I think they were using the Black Basta or Alpha V as their ransomware, and it just shows like the affiliates have free reign; they can use whoever they want.
It reminds me of almost like a multi-level marketing like setup where now like I mean you gotta kind of give it to DragonForce to some extent by pivoting to a different way. And they're taking like, okay, give us 20% of the ransom collected by basically we're almost becoming some sort of like HR back office platform. Like it's really like that to me is like mind boggling and very creative. I don't want to say I admire it because I obviously do not like it by any means, but it's fascinating that they came up with a way to monetize the organization and back office stuff that no one likes to do. And it just shows that threat actors don't either.
It kind of reminds me of WeWork. It's like they're the WeWork of ransomware.
Yes. Yes. Totally. I mean, and there's going to be like spin-offs like there were from WeWork, and maybe we'll see how that goes. Something to watch.
Maybe SoftBank will come in and invest in them.
I just found that like really an interesting like combination of the two stories that I've been tracking. And hopefully, I mean, Harrod says right now that their online shopping and retail is back on, yet they are still operating at limited IT capacity. So I'm not really certain that I would personally buy anything from Harrod's online right now. But again, I could be persuaded if it was.
I was just about to say, let's go do some testing, Brooke. We need to do some actual.
Yeah,
anonymous
that would be another
I'm
podcast. We could do that on a separate feed. That would be hilarious.
Screen share. What would Brooke and Violet? What's in their cart, and what are they going to use to test the hackers?
Well, I was going to comment that I can't comment about the UK law. I'll leave that to the brothers and sisters across the pond. But in the US, what we counsel to retail clients is that retail is not a highly regulated industry sector. So you don't have the type of structures that exist if you were in the financial sector or in healthcare. So instead, you sort of fall back to what is the law, the general law expect of retailers in cybersecurity, and what about the non-legal issues? And namely, you brought up in the very beginning of your comments, Brooke, which is the reputational harm. And I've noticed that for retailers, that actually is more of a motivator than legal regulatory liability or data breach notification concerns. It's really the reputation that drives the behavior on cyber.
Stu, remember when it was almost like only retailers after Target, Home Depot, when all of the retailers were worried really about the customer service piece. So who's going to answer the phone on the 800 number? And how are they going to get in touch with someone? And do we have all of the customer facing people with scripts and materials? I kind of wonder if it's as stringent, because it was really focused back then. I mean, I was on the notification side, but we were so focused on having SLAs where we had a quick call center that we could just turn on so that the people at Home Depot that were answering carpet questions could transfer any questions about breach to a directed call center. I kind of wonder what the customer service like focus is now, percentage of, focus on a breach.
Yeah, it's interesting. We always say that it's that if you identify the sort of long scaries of cyber, like the big ones that are out there, you don't want to find yourself the defendant in a class action lawsuit. You don't want to find yourself the subject of a government investigation. And there's the media and social media. And you really should be prepared with plans and strategies in the event of an incident. What are you going to say? What are the words you're going to use? What's the phraseology? How are you going to mitigate reputational harm? And that's where we focus our our analysis. I do remember the granularity of the questions on call centers back then, and it's funny because that's not what exists now in most cases. Now it's very pro forma FAQ responses,
Right.
and I think that almost like sometimes when we ask for specific questions, they get annoyed. They're like, "Oh, now I need to go talk to somebody." So we do try to be advocative in our approach, but
now it makes me want to go to all the chatbots on all of these retailers and just start seeing what I can get out of it.
Oh,
But don't you think that because of the granularity back then, the third party class actions were maybe a little bit less prevalent because they were more directed, and now it feels pro forma? Also, the fact that I think it's wise to just kind of expect that if you hear on the news about some sort of cyber breach, that there's going to be third party actions. That's just the nature of the beast now. It's more rare. So I think that, especially in the retail sector, as to Jess and Tenno's point, I saw her comment over there, shoppers are still going to shop, but at the same time, the power of the purse to go to other sites and other places.
I think people are so immune to it at this point. It's how many letters have we gotten at this point? I literally don't even think twice about it anymore. I'm waiting for my next one so I don't have to pay for credit monitoring. And that's like literally what my mindset is at this point.
My Uber driver yesterday asked me, he's like, "What about X product?" And I said, "Well, really, what we talk about all the time is going to see the latest incident, going and getting that credit monitoring."
Yeah. So Brian, switching gears.
So-
You had, speaking of all the incidents that are out there, you were looking into something that might not help with that. So
Yeah,
what's top of mind?
so first, let me just say, Brooke, I'm actually going to be in the UK in a couple of weeks. So if you want me to pick you anything up from a brick and mortar Harrods, let me know. I'd be glad to do that.
Cash only.
I'll write you a list. I'll be back the first week of July, but at the same time, I mean, that's 2 months away. So, I might have
in the
some
meantime
list for you.
Yeah, so my news story, kind of product of the age, and slightly embarrassing confession, is actually not a quote unquote news story. It's reductively two LinkedIn posts, right? But they're from really impressive thought leaders, and I thought the power of the two of them kind of next to each other really got me thinking. And so the first, maybe it's two, maybe three LinkedIn posts, because the first is Jen Easterly, who reposted Pat Oped, who's the global CISO of JP Morgan Chase. Jen Easterly, if you don't know, is former head of CISA, major thought leader in cybersecurity, really, really impressive person. And if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, you probably should. When she uses words like brilliant and must read, then you must read. So it's as simple as that. So she posted a comment on this open letter that Pat Oped, again, global CISO, JP Morgan Chase, released. And it's an open letter to third-party suppliers. And the gist of it is, and I'll paraphrase a little bit of it, but the modern SaaS model is creating substantial vulnerability that is essentially weakening the global economic system. And it says that the things that need to happen are, software must prioritize security over rushing functions, right? That's not anything new. We've heard about that for a while now. For the last several years, AppSec has become a thing. You've seen kind of the emergence of DevSecOps as best practice, right? And there's been a lot of lessons learned, kind of the hard way. The other recommendation or major thing that needs to happen is that we need to rethink architecture to account for SaaS-based integrations, right? Traditionally we thought about securing things around with a perimeter and have network segmentation, and that's not as effective anymore when you have the API layer, data coming in and out of systems in just a different way. So the third point is that needs to be a collective effort to kind of reimagine that. So that was the first post, right? And that, again, it's not really anything we haven't heard before. It's not a new push. It's more of a renewed push. So, I came across that and just kind of stuck with me. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Then I came across the second post, and the second post was from Peter McKay, who is the CEO of SNCC, right? And SNCC is a leading AppSec company, if you don't know it. And
The Dobermans, right?
the
That's the
Dobermans, that's right.
marketing image.
That's right. That's right. And Peter McKay basically said, we're going to see a major AI breach in the next 6 to 12 months, right? And that's probably a safe bet, right? The reasons he listed, however, were really thought-provoking for me, especially in reflection of the previous post I just mentioned, right? He listed a couple of reasons that kind of probably know to a certain extent, right? Like we know that threat actors are going to really benefit by means of, enhanced toolkit from a lot of AI, especially agentic AI. They're just going to be able to do things faster, and they're going to be able to scale faster, and they're going to be more destructive, right? It's that simple. The other piece is kind of new attack vectors related to AI. And I think here, we're starting to kind of have these terms be a little bit more commonplace. Things like prompt injection, data poisoning, model extraction. So, those things are interesting new attack vectors. It wasn't necessarily anything like brand new and fresh, but what really grabbed my attention was in thinking about the attack vector vein. One of the ways that AI is really going to revolutionize the economy is in code production, right? There's going to be a significant reduction in barriers to entry for people to write code, to deploy code. You're going to see a lot of this come when agentic AI comes about, and they can essentially write products, great products, and they don't necessarily have all the lessons learned from these several years of AppSec and security by design, and everything that we've kind of from the security side been pushing on to developers to be sure you get that balance right between convenience and functionality and security, right? So just by the sheer numbers game of it, if there is a proliferation of new code, then that means there's also going to be a proliferation of vulnerabilities, right? And so you're going to see a lot more vulnerabilities come into play. Now, when you multiply that by this other thing that Peter McKay mentioned that I thought was interesting is, the rush to implement agentic AI, even the rush to create agentic AI, there is this kind of renewed, like this is a race, right? And there's a real risk that the security element gets lost in this race, where people cut corners to get to market faster, right? And so you also have not just the race to create, but the race to implement these things and benefit from all the wild things that we hear and are promised by this AI revolution, right? Companies want to be using this because there's real economic value to that. When you multiply the vulnerabilities that come from rushed integration times the vulnerabilities of kind of cut corners and insecure code at scale, that's really alarming, right? And I
It's
think
a brave new world.
yeah, it is. And I mean, we need to think about how we're going to handle this in our own ecosystem. But the quote that I thought resonated with me most from Peter McKay, no, sorry, this is from Pat Oped, again, the global CISO of JP Morgan Chase, was, and I'll read it, the pursuit of market share at the expense of security exposes entire customer ecosystems to significant risk and will result in an unsustainable situation for the economic system, right? So sorry to dampen everybody's Friday. Stu, we're probably going to need a Friday funny pretty soon, but that's what grabbed my attention this week.
There's always one waiting for you on a Friday.
We need to add a live one to the end, Stu.
I have
That's a good idea.
that's a good idea. So a couple of things. So first, I that's an interesting comment coming from Chase Bank. Just say that that last comment. Secondly, I read the letter and I always try to give pause when a very large company or a very powerful person tries to start telling folks kind of what's best about the future. And I don't know if they know. I mean, it was a very interesting analysis, but I see kind of the way these things play out at a more micro level, kind of out in the field. And these are just developers that are trying their best to make their way in the world and come out with good products. And they don't know, but it is a race. It's a very competitive race. And if you don't act in the interest of getting to market and making it compatible with your client's needs, your customers' needs, you're not going to make it. And I do, though, also believe in a bit of the free market, especially in tech, and that market forces do reward good behavior and penalize bad behavior when it comes to security, and especially in tech, because there's always someone making something better. And so when the product comes out and it's untested and it gets incorporated in a rush, and then there's some security issue, and then there's a problem, people will learn. And then the next generation will not have those problems. And that's how that happens in reality. And I am not the CISO for Chase, and I am humble in that for that credential. But I just see things kind of out there in the world, and I think it's easy for him to say. I'll just leave it at that.
The counterpoint might be, though, there's obviously learn from experience, right? But the counterpoint is, at what cost, and could those costs have been avoided, right? That to me,
and I think the market will determine. Oh, this is just Stu's opinion. I think the market will ultimately make those determinations.
There's a quote that I always think of in situations like this where, let me see if I can get it right. There's never time to do it right, but there's always time to fix it later. Right? And so to me, like, this is one of those situations. If you look back at the internet, right, it's like, to me, it's the same exact scenario where the internet was a rush to get things out as quickly as possible. And security, nobody really knew about at that time anyway. But we're seeing the same exact thing happen with AI now. Now, Brian, to your point, I think we are smarter now and can avoid some of the issues that we've learned the hard way from. But I think I'm in Stu's camp on this one. I don't see companies stopping to think about, how do we do this safely? How do we protect consumers beyond just like the basics of I'm going to say this, and Violet's probably going to laugh because it never happens in practice, but let's not use their information without their consent, right? I think people will say it. I think things are going to happen, but I look at it kind of from a internal, external, right? Because to me, the bigger risk is if you have these companies that are using AI to help code and speed things up and are not doing the right reviews. And the whole Sneak thing is interesting because their whole company is based on AppSec and scanning code before it goes live. And so I think they're uniquely positioned to help curb some of this. But if you have that risk on
AppSec application security, right? Right.
Correct. Yes, correct. Application security. So I think if you have that risk on the external side, it's going to be a field day for attackers going after mass vulnerabilities and everything like that. And then you have the internal side where once an attacker gets inside, now they can just scan the internal environment for vulnerable apps and get a foothold. And so there's no safe spot to hide really. But I would put a lot more emphasis on if you have a production ready application that is you're selling to people or is internet facing, that has to have the most stringent reviews possible.
And there are internal controls already from a free market perspective, because if you're going to solicit money, if you're going to raise funds, you can't just be ignoring security. No one's going to give you money if you're ignoring security. You have to prove yourself. So I do think that there are controls out there from a market perspective that does alleviate some of the pressure points that was pointed out by the author of that memo. And things could always be done better. And so there wasn't any bad. Those were all excellent points raised, and I say all of this with humility. I know developers, and Jason, you had that post. And I'm trying to be mindful of the time, but you had that post of yours recently on vibe coding. Mm-hmm. And if you go on certain other social medias, that's all anybody's ever talking about right now is vibe coding. What's the best way to protect your vibe coding? And here's everything that you need to know about vibe. This thing came out like 5 minutes ago, and there's experts all over about vibe code.
I was just
So-
going to throw in another new word, so keep going.
No, but to Brian's earlier point, when you apply the dabblers who are going to go out there and start dabbling in code because of their ability to access something that had previously had these barriers to entry from a technical perspective, and now you're right, they're going to insert those into the marketplace in combination with the proliferation of AI. Yeah, it is a brave new world. It's still a race, but it's we shall see.
You teed me up perfectly because the way to exploit that, security researchers have started to call slop squatting. Like that is one technique. Slop being the hallucinations that might come. We see it in generative AI where it comes up with a quote that no one ever said, or a song lyric that you'll ask for and it doesn't actually exist. What actually happens with the open source code too. And so what the theory is that at some point also the hallucinations are shown to repeat. So it's not like every time there's a new hallucination. They're starting to see the hallucinations repeating, and the theory is that the bad guys, instead of that not existing, they're going to make it exist. So if they make the accident in the code, it's actually going to lead to somewhere that's actually going to be a landmine, which I think is like let's plan on lazy developers. That's what it feels like. It's like, let's plan on lazy developers to make consistent mistakes, and let's just get our territory out there and see who falls for it. I mean, that to me is.
I think the key thing is there. It's not even. It doesn't have to be a developer, right?
Yeah.
Like to Stu's point, it could be anybody who doesn't know anything about coding, let alone security. And now it's equal opportunity to develop apps and publish them, which is great from an innovation standpoint, but terrifying from every other standpoint.
I think we're uniquely positioned now, and just from life in general, to kind of spot this and protect the best that we can from it. I mean, think about it. Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you're a musician, you're having to go through those channels, and then YouTube and every TikTok, and now you can put your content on there by yourself. You're by no means a professional, but your stuff looks pretty professional. So it's kind of like the parallel of just life in general just happens to go that way. And now that we've seen it time and time again, especially where it comes to like technology
Jason
in and
really
of
likes the
itself.
word democratized. So if you could bring democratized into that sentence, he would love it.
I'm just gonna use it as often as I can from now on, and I will give you credit. And yeah, so every single post I make from now on will have that word somehow in that sentence.
So you're going to democratize the use of democratize.
Yes. See?
It's the worst word except for all the other words.
We should just place
That's a
scatting
good one,
trace.
Brian. I like what you did there. Very nice.
So we had 2 minutes left, but there was a question about quantum risk. And Stu, I know we were talking about this before. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it is interesting. They are sounds like really close to, or they're already there to making giant leaps in quantum computing, which raises cybersecurity issues insofar as the ability to crack heretofore uncrackable encryption, because the original projections on some of the well-known encryption products were like, well, it would take thousands of years or millions of years of computer power that we have today. But with quantum computing, as I understand it, as a layperson, that computing time has been reduced to the span of minutes, and so, or potentially. So that is the sort of academic question that got raised in this past week or the week or two ago, when one of the big magazines published an article about this and saying, we can see a future where there's a lot of existing encryption, that legacy encryption, let's call it, that is going to be out there, and that people need to take a look at, and it might create a new cottage industry about how to handle that problem. Because every time, I'll say this about humankind, every time there's a problem that's going to affect a whole bunch of people, we do seem to be able to engineer our way out of it or figure out a solution. So I do think that we'll figure out a solution to the quantum computing security issues as well. But I thought it was very worthy of a few moments on our show.
Yeah, well, the good news is there are quantum resistant algorithms. So a solution exists. It's just going to be on people to implement at this point. So,
And before we leave, I want to give a heads up for next time, because next month we actually have Mariana Swan coming from Pondurance and Tim Francis from the now newly at Liberty. So that'll be a really fun group too.
So be
Very
on the
cool.
lookout for that invite, and make sure that you follow everyone here on LinkedIn. And with that, we will see everyone during the next morning.